Hi everybody, I'm First Alert Chief Meteorologist Stephen Bowers. I'm tracking Tropical Storm Idalia for you this Monday evening. It's likely to become a hurricane overnight tonight, and then it targets the Gulf Coast of Florida. It is gaining intensity over the Yucatan Strait right now, just off the coast of Cuba. This 6-hour animation of the satellite shows that the center of circulation, as it restarts right there, it's almost exposed, but as the day goes on, we get into the late afternoon and the early evening, it's almost entirely covered with these clouds here, and those thunderstorms that are coming from those clouds are going to release heat into the core of this tropical storm, and that heat is going to help to energize it, and it's going to help to intensify it. Now, on the U.S.-based radar, we are starting to see some of these outer rain bands that are working their way over the dry Tortugas and up toward the Everglades on the northeastern quadrant of this developing tropical storm, and again, it is likely to become a hurricane over the next 24 hours. I want to show you the big picture because this is kind of how we determine where it's going. And if you follow the flow of these showers and storms that are over the United States, and you follow the clouds that are up over the plains here, we can kind of carve out the flow of an upper-level low-pressure trough, and that's going to help to direct this more toward the Florida Big Bend or the Tampa Bay area of Florida, as opposed to allowing it to drift farther west towards, say, Pensacola, Mobile, New Orleans, or even farther west than there. Also worth a mention, we've got Hurricane Franklin out in the Atlantic Ocean. That's this beast that you're seeing right here that I've circled in red. Winds are up to 150 miles per hour, so that's a very powerful and dangerous hurricane. That one's working its way off to the North Atlantic. It may brush Bermuda, but it's not going to be a direct threat to any other land areas. So these are the spaghetti models. A lot of people look at these online, I know, and I want to show them to you and kind of break down what's happening because you actually see very clearly the interaction with that upper level trough that I talked about. This cluster of lines all represent different computer models, track forecasts from those different computer models, and we show this by midnight to 6 a.m. moving across the southeastern Gulf of Mexico and starting to pick up some forward momentum here, and then that trough digs down into the northwestern Gulf right here and starts to turn the storm more off toward the north and east, and we see that very clearly here. Now, to what degree that turn happens, that's up for more question, but we notice there's a lot of clustering in the models, really from about the Florida Big Bend over to the Tampa Bay area, and so that's probably where confidence is the highest that this is going, but there are some outlying models that go as far west as, say, Port St. Joe or Panama City. I think that's looking less and less likely with time, so that's good news for that area, not such good news for the other areas. This will continue tracking inland, and then it works its way out into the Atlantic Ocean through the rest of this weekend. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the official National Hurricane Center forecast with the cone of uncertainty, and we're going to overlay our futurecasts on top of that so we can kind of get an idea of what's going on here. This is what happened this afternoon going into tonight, and by midnight Mountain Time, so 2 a.m. Eastern Time, we expect that this is a Category 1 hurricane with 85-mile-per-hour winds, and it's tracking inland, or, well, into the Gulf of Mexico, I should say, not inland. But as it's tracking into the southeastern Gulf of Mexico, it still is not very well organized, but it's becoming better organized. And we really start to see that through Tuesday morning and up through about midday. We start to see that it just looks like a hurricane now. I will point out, though, the official forecast of the National Hurricane Center, at least the center of the cone, is a little bit displaced from the center of our futurecast. That's not uncommon, but you'll note that our futurecast is well within that cone of uncertainty, and it's also worth a mention that by midday Tuesday Mountain Time, winds are up to 105 miles per hour, so that's a strengthening Category 2 hurricane. Let's keep moving this thing forward. By about midnight Tuesday night, going into Wednesday morning, we have a very powerful Category 3 hurricane with winds of around 120 miles per hour. That again is 2 a.m. Eastern Time, and this is nearing the coast. Now remember, I told you our futurecast kind of hugs the right side of the cone of uncertainty. That means a bigger impact for Tampa Bay if that materializes. It also means it's going to move inland a little bit earlier if that in fact materializes. Let's step forward here, and we see it crashing ashore around 4 a.m., probably north of the Tampa Bay area and very close to Cedar Key, it looks like. based on our futurecast. But of course, a little bit up the coast is where the official forecast track is. But again, I'll re-emphasize that our futurecast is still well within that cone of uncertainty, so this is very much a possibility here. This is a strong hurricane that's making landfall. We're going to talk more about the impact here in just a second, but as it moves inland, it's going to weaken fairly quickly. It's going to bring the heavy rain, it's going to bring the tornado threat and the flash flood threat with it as it does weaken over North Florida and South Georgia. By midday Wednesday Mountain Time, 2 a.m. Eastern Time, it's a Category 1 hurricane with 90-mile-per-hour winds, and it continues that track off toward the northeast, and it gradually turns more toward the east so that it rolls off the coast of North Carolina on Tuesday afternoon, and it heads back out into the Atlantic Ocean, and ideally that's going to move on away from the United States. Let's move back with that because that's an important map that we want to take a look at there. The hurricane warnings and tropical storm warnings are what we're showing you here. And you see the tropical storm warnings in the yellow shaded areas along the Yucatan Peninsula and also around Jamaica there. And then the hurricane warnings are in that red shaded area. We're going to work back to the north here though because these watches and warnings do include parts of Florida. So we're going to come back up to the Florida Big Bend area and we see the hurricane warnings. You see those again in the red shaded areas. And these actually stop here at Indian Pass, and then it's a tropical storm warning that continues up through Port St. Joe and Cape San Blas there. The hurricane warning starts at Indian Pass, as I mentioned, comes up through Apalachicola, Alligator Point. It comes on down through Cedar Key and all the way down to the Anclote Keys in the Tampa Bay area is included in that. And then the orange shaded area just south of Tampa Bay includes Sarasota, it includes Fort Myers, Naples, all the way down to Chokoloskee. That's a hurricane watch and also a tropical storm warning. The tropical storm warning also includes the dry tortugas here in the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. And then the orange box you see here along the Florida Keys, that's a tropical storm watch, and we see more of those tropical storm watches up the east coast of Florida, right around Cape Canaveral. Those extend up through Jacksonville and right up the coast of Georgia and through a large portion there of the South Carolina coast as well. Let's talk about the impacts here. The storm surge is the big obvious one, and we're talking a storm surge that could top 12 feet for many areas of the Florida Big Bend and just north of the Tampa Bay area. And that includes these areas around Cedar Key and also up toward Alligator Point is where we could see that 5 to 8 foot storm surge. You head on down closer to Tampa Bay and we're talking about a 6 to 9 foot storm surge. But some storm surge, even a small storm surge, is possible as far away as, say, Port St. Joe and maybe the south side of Metro Panama City. Apalachicola, East Point, you're looking at about a 3 to 5 foot storm surge. Extending down the coast, 4 to 7 feet of storm surge is possible around Tampa Bay, including Clearwater and also St. Petersburg and Tampa itself. You work your way on down the coast, of course, it gets a little smaller, but even down toward the Everglades and around Chokoloskee Island, there still is the potential there for a good solid 1 to 3 foot storm surge. And then there's the rainfall. This can cause flash flooding as many areas exceed 10 inches of rain. And as this map catches up, is it going to catch up? Well, it's entirely possible that we have areas that go over maybe 12 to 15 inches of rain, especially inland in Florida. And the color scheme of the map is not catching up for some reason, but that's okay. You get the idea of what I'm talking about there. And in addition to that, there's a tornado threat that comes with that flash flood threat and with that storm surge threat. All of that inland threats include the river flooding, the flash flooding, and the tornadoes. That's going to spread from North Florida right up through South Georgia and perhaps even into parts of South Carolina, as what will likely then be Hurricane Idalia works its way inland. So this is a potential major hurricane, a likely major hurricane, and a major impact here on the west coast of Florida that includes the Tampa Bay metro area and extends up toward the Florida Big Bend. That includes the areas near and just to the southeast, especially of the Tallahassee area. So a big storm for Florida. And again, this is going to spread inland as we look ahead through Tuesday night and Wednesday. So a big hurricane, probably one of the biggest we've seen so far this year, certainly the most powerful to make landfall this year. As a much more powerful hurricane, Hurricane Franklin is well offshore and likely will stay offshore. And we talked about that a little bit earlier in this video. So that's what we have for our Monday evening. We'll be watching this closely here over the next couple of days.